Parents getting into his testy phase. Oh, it's great.
But it just everlasting.
Should we get Lacey? Okay.
Oh,
It is 6 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Alicia, could you please do roll call?
Yes. Lori Blargen.
Here.
Ian McDonald.
here.
Matt Kufalt. Lacey Oster.
Here.
Bruce Blargen. Cherie Link. And Marge Below.
Here.
Okay, our district mission. Together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there a motion to approve the agenda tonight? I would like to put in right now, we are at 8 public comments, which would put us slightly over 20 minutes. So if there is any motion, to go
Make a
forward with
motion
that.
to amend the agenda to allow 24 minutes for public comment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We will then move on to our public comment. Opinions and ideas contributed by students, parents, staff, and other citizens are valuable to the school board. The board will receive such input without comment or take no action relative to any items brought forth. You may direct the district administrator to consider such an item at an appropriate place on the agenda or a subsequent meeting. The board has now set aside 24 minutes for this purpose. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Those wishing to make a public comment, I have their card, and please state your name, your address, and any group represented, if any. We'll start with Kate Jessica.
You come last, maybe first. All right, you guys.
And Bruce will be timing for 3 minutes.
Okay, that's great. I shouldn't be
Thank
that
you.
long. All right. Hello, my name is Kate Jessica. I live at 1785 46th Street here in Somerset. At the last meeting, I carefully listened to what others had to say regarding the removal of books from our library. I really think that we can come together and do what's best for our children in this district. Taking into account the different parenting styles, we can make accommodations for those that want these books made unavailable to their children. Parents should be able to opt out just as they can for sexual education in the middle school. Let's also take into account that parents have put their faith in the professionals. Some of us have, and they have already reviewed these books and deemed them fit for the high school students. We need to set an example for our kids to remain civilized. I was trying to come up with an analogy for those that want these books to be removed from our library, and I came up with a couple of thoughts. First, if these books were in a private Christian high school, I'd stand by in solidarity with the parents that want these removed from the library. But again, this is a public school. My second thought is, if there were a group of parents backed by an organization like PETA, and they showed up at our school board meetings demanding the removal of books with any mention of hunting or reference to eating meat or wearing fur, I think many of us would agree that we shouldn't bend to meet the demands of those parents. By that example, we can agree that letting a small group of parents determine what's best for all families is not a good idea. I'm hoping, I'm also begging, that we put an end to all this and let our school board get back to more pressing issues. Thank you for your time.
Stephen?
Good evening. I'm Stephen Negolo, 196th Avenue in Somerset. I'm here about the books. The board has the authority to make the decision on the books. Please note that the will of the parents is a majority against exposing their children in our tax-funded public schools to indecent, sexually graphic material not legally appropriate for children. You will be held accountable to the parents in this district. Yes, I said parents. Did we forget that the kids in the district have parents whose job it is to keep them psychologically safe and teach them the manners of sexuality at the appropriate time, based on their values. Values that come from our American heritage, with faith in God that we acknowledge in our Pledge of Allegiance, that we thankfully still stayed in school. Instead of parents being included in the decision-making of appropriateness of literature/books and curriculum in school, the so-called experts make the decisions behind closed doors and not open to the parents whose tax dollars are paying them. Therefore, there's little chance of accountability. This is why we hold you accountable as a board. Does it take 120 minutes and several weeks to pore over one book by so-called experts when a parent can look at these in 5 minutes and know that they're inappropriate? Why is this being drug out in a process that is not fair or objective? It's because truly there is an arrogance that we are now fighting. The experts know better than we as parents. It's truly insulting. Let me repeat, we will not forget the decisions you make here or the inaction that you choose to take or wash your hands of this critical decision. You can use all the jargon to try and paint this review process as legitimate and fair, but we see right through it. The lack of transparency does not go unnoticed. We are aligned with the majority, who are the parents across the nation, fighting for the psychological and physical safety and well-being of their children, all while opposing the radical, political, left-wing ideologies that continue their insidious efforts to corrupt the values of our children by planting pornography in schools under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the secular cult of today. You have the authority to make the right decision, and you should act now. It is not only our responsibility, but our rights as parents to protect our children. We will not go away.
20 seconds.
It's time to envision a brighter future for the school district, one where our parents can support a thriving school attractive to those inside and outside the district, where the schools uphold traditional values and parents know their children are safe. If enrollments and funding go up, we can invest and retain our staff, and that makes us more excellent. Thank you.
Stephanie?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm one of the founding members of Moms for Liberty St. Croix County. I live at 62nd Street in Somerset. I have significant concerns about the efficacy and the effectiveness of the rubric that is being used in the book review process. While I am a concerned parent, I reviewed the rubric based on my professional background and 24 years of experience with a global strategy and management consulting firm. I am deeply familiar with the design and integrity of surveys, questionnaires, evaluations, assessments, and diagnostics. I have notable experience with higher education institutions, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and corporations. This includes consulting 3 highly respected and world-renowned universities in the US. It is from this professional perspective that I reviewed the rubric. The rubric does not sufficiently address the concerns raised by the parents, and some concerns are not covered at all. It is not surprising at all that the perks of being a wallflower was allowed back in the library based on the highly subjective nature and ambiguity of the rubric. The rubric does not contain anything that protects our children from books that normalize or potentially condone behaviors that are dangerous and illegal, such as drugs, underage drinking, and rape. The rubric does not contain anything that protects the psychological safety of the reader, such as a rape or assault victim with PTSD who may be reading the book. The rubric is not aligned with the numerous policies intended to promote a positive learning environment that models high standards. The rubric does not ensure compliance with policies and rules that are enforced around profanity in the schools and at school events. While I shared several concerns, and there are more, I would also like to personally offer to be a part of defining a solution that serves our community. Schools should be a safe place. Children are already exposed to enough unhealthy and harmful influences. For example, my junior kindergartner came home from school and told me he had learned the F word and the gesture that goes along with it. Of course, we were very shocked that 4- and 5-year-olds were learning this, and we had the conversation, we're glad he told us, we had the conversation about that that's inappropriate and the consequences. Now let me be clear, it was not the fault of the school or the teacher who he happened to adore that my child learned this from another student. Kids will learn these words and behaviors from other kids, from entertainment, from all sorts of other sources in our culture. We don't need to intentionally include profanity in the books in the school for our kids to learn about this. I think everyone in this room can agree that school should be a safe place for kids to learn and grow. The books in the library should not be the exception. Let's do better for our children and our community, Somerset. more detailed review that I think was emailed in case any of the board wants. Thank you.
Roxanne?
Roxanne Kendall, 286 Arbor Hills Drive, Bolton, Wisconsin, Somerset School District. At the last school board meeting, it was shared that between $3,000 and $4,000 will be spent on providing copies of the banned books to the review committee. This led me to look into what this book ban could be costing the district, and taxpayers ought to know. It's estimated that approximately 147.4 hours have been dedicated to the review process by 7 district employees, both administrators and teachers. While this time is included in their annual salaries, the opportunity cost and loss of productivity of almost 150 district employee hours, and more to come, is concerning. What could we have done and do in the future with these resources? What opportunities were missed that would have directly benefited students because time was spent on reviewing books? The district lawyer hourly rate is approximately $265 per hour, and the lawyer has been consulted on this issue, so there's cost there. 4 district employees on 9-month contracts will be reading 3 books over the summer and logging their hours for additional compensation. Estimating, again, this is estimating, but we could go with 6, 8, how many hours each person per book at their average hourly wage of $30 per hour comes to approximately $2,880 additional compensation dollars. Is this a wise use of taxpayer money? Could these resources be used in a more productive way? Why should taxpayers who don't support these efforts foot the bill for something that doesn't benefit all students in this public school? Are we financially prepared as a district for more hours dedicated to this issue? And are we financially prepared for potential additional lawyer fees and/or lawsuits, should they be brought against the district for violation of students' First Amendment rights? The ACLU seems to be closely monitoring public school book bans, so this is a valid concern. We just eliminated valued programs and staff, in part to cut the budget by $1.4 million. It's estimated this review process could take 3 years, which will significantly impact our district bottom line. Are we prepared for more cuts next year if we fall short on the budget again due to these unexpected costs to the district? It would cost the district $0 and minimal resources to flag books in student library accounts, which families do not want their children to read. Thank you.
Travis?
My name is Travis Schochner. I live on 2116 54th Street. I would like to state before we get too far into this that this is a pure first world problem. We are discussing the luxury of our youth going to public schools to read and use their imaginations to grow as a person, instead of having their faces buried in a screen. This feels like it should be an episode of South Park, with one side promoting developing empathy and being an active, engaged parent to our children, while the other says, that's too hard and let's blame Canada because they're the source of all the problems. This conclusion comes from watching hours of public comment around this topic, and it seems like irony is completely lost on those supporting the removal of these books. First, there's the irony of ignorance. Many women have cited for their justification a theological text that, if followed as they stated they desired, the women currently serving on the board would be expelled, all the women in the room would be banned from public discussion, and the women that did speak up would be required to be stoned to death by those in attendance. There's the irony of language. On multiple occasions, people have displayed their personal kinks by reading out loud passages, out of context passages, and calling it pornography. By definition of the term, this would mean that the presenters were sexually aroused by scenes that were meant to horrify the reader, while other presenters were discovering that they might be closer to the middle or opposite side of the sexual spectrum than they were comfortably acknowledging and judging themselves harshly for it. There's the irony of laziness. Many of the defenses were taken verbatim from multiple hate groups' publicly released talking points. There was even a sloppy defense that tried to use and then ignore established framing centered around the #1 cause of death of children in the United States today. And finally, for me, is the greatest irony, the irony of history. Conservatives have fought this self-indulgent culture war for generations and constantly failed. Boomers were not corrupted by the reefer madness or Elvis's hips. Gen X were not manipulated into evil by what is considered now nerd culture and the power of rock. Video games and rap music did not cause chaos to grip the millennials. This is just more fear of change that conservatives have carried throughout history, and wealthy bigots foster and fund to maintain this fear. A fear that is, as history has shown, our current youth will justifiably point and laugh at in the
20
future.
seconds.
Personally, it is my belief that our goal as parents should be to avoid being the butt of our children's jokes in the future.
Hetty Schochner?
Patty Schochner, 1064 to 10th Avenue. I know that the school board and everybody's working really hard on the new district, mission statement, everything. And what a perfect opportune time, because together, our district mission says together we engage, educate, empower all learners. Now we can change it to say accept or only learners that believe like we do. Because clearly that is what a certain group of people in this community want. This community is divided because of these hateful words, and it is only going to get worse. As policymakers, it is your job to make sure that the policies are followed, and we educate all learners, not just those we are comfortable with. Yeah.
Erica Johnson?
Last week I didn't give my address, my name. Erica Johnson, 1999 County Road C in Somerset. I want to start out tonight with some vocabulary. A lot of these terms being thrown around, and I want to make sure everyone understands the meaning of these words. First one is freedom, and these are terms from the Oxford Language Dictionary. These are the definitions. The power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. The second meaning is absence of subjugation to foreign domination or despotic government. Okay, liberty, that's another term that's kind of thrown around a lot. And that's a state of being free within a society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. And the power or scope to act as one pleases. So how is showing liberty and freedom by banning books, right? I don't know if you could read my t-shirt here, but never in the history of book banning has it been the people seeking freedom and liberty that have been trying to ban books. It has been a myopic viewpoint and people that are trying to press their religious or their zealot beliefs that are trying to limit people's viewpoints and other experiences. So how is it taking away all parents' right to choose freedom, a free thing? And how is that a mark of a free society? The people who have myopic viewpoints use these words to push their agendas. And it's a mark of pusillanimous organizations that use freedom and liberty and is exactly the opposite meaning of what those words are. So here's some other terms for people. Authoritarianism. Favoring and enforcing strict obedience to authority, especially that of government, at the expense of personal freedom. And fascism. A political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of a fascist, that exalts nation and often race above individual and stands for centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimen, and forcible suppression of opposition. So a tendency to control or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. So what terms sound more in line with book banning? So as the Princess Bride said, so people use these terms, and that word you keep saying, I don't think it means what you think it means. That's all I got.
Katie Forsberg?
Bruce, can I request you not say the 22nd thing, because I'll totally get thrown off and then I won't be able to read it. Yeah, I won't even see it, I'm just gonna read. All right, Patty Forsberg, 350 Paquin Drive, Somerset. This district has real serious problems, yet we have parents hell-bent on wasting staff time and taxpayer dollars on a fake issue. It is ridiculous that they continue to waste the time and limited resources because they can. What is the financial cost? What is the emotional cost? When is the financial and professional cost going to be too much? When will the district stop pandering to the special interest groups hell-bent on holding our district back? Educators are afraid to teach in our district because they fear being fired for assigning the wrong book or showing the wrong movie. Amazing professionals are leaving because their mental health deserves better than what this group is doing to them. Educators are underpaid, underappreciated, overworked, and mentally exhausted from the bullying this group's done and has done for the last 3 years. As you know, Madam President, the state of Minnesota, their districts are in a lot better position than the state of Wisconsin is. How can our district compete with not only the districts in our area that do not pander to special interest groups, but to a state that adequately funds districts to support staff, when ours are forced to deal with the toxicity of this parent group? Our district will continue to have issues with both retainment and recruitment due to this group's very public and very disturbing attacks on our public educators. A book on a table was so offensive to a parent in the group that she keeps a picture of it on her phone and posts it to show how teachers are grooming students in the high school. We have a group of parents who are so offended by books that they completely negate the fact that teens have sex in high school. They drink, they get pregnant, they do drugs, they smoke, they vape, they use vulgar language, they watch porn. They act recklessly at times and they struggle with mental illness. Teens get raped, teens die by suicide, teens die by violence. To assert that teens need to be sheltered from library books is naive at best and gross politics at worst. As the board works to pacify the offended parents by meeting in the middle, you must realize there is no middle. The law clearly defines obscenity and clearly establishes that these books do not fall into the area of obscenity or harmful materials for children. I do not understand how, as a board, you are afraid to tell these parents that you refuse to trounce on the civil rights of our high school students. Somerset School District has statutory obligation to provide students a collection of books that reflect the cultural diversity and pluralistic nature of the American society. The idea that these parents want to remove literature that does just that is extremely disheartening. Parents have the right to limit their own children's access to materials. They do not have the right to dictate how this board follows the laws. They do not have the right to remove all children's access to literature. Our entire district is impacted by the group's continual disruption of our district's abilities to educate our children. I feel sorry for our admin and staff who must do the work with little to no compensation. I feel sorry for the literatures who are getting stolen from them. But mostly I feel incredibly sorry for the teenagers who have parents that feel they are not capable to comprehend literature and its context.
Okay, moving on with our agenda. Trent, you are up with the WIA renewal.
Thank you.
Do you want me to open that up, Trent? No?
You don't have to.
Okay.
So the first of two items tonight is the WIA renewal for membership for our athletic teams. This is an annual item that comes before the board. Every high school in the state of Wisconsin is supposed to take this action at the board level. This action item allows us to continue our membership with the WIA, which with high school sports in the state of Wisconsin, that is our only option. There is no cost to be a member of the WIA. They suspended those fees, I think, back in 2014, 2015, and they have not reinstated them since. So this allows us to continue our membership. So pretty standard operating procedure with that. This would then come back to the board at the business meeting or regular meeting later this month for final approval. Questions? And then the second item that I have for you tonight is the first review of our extracurricular code of conduct for the 2013-2014 school year. We've gotten this to a good place over the past 5+ years where we have not had to make any significant changes in recent years now. Typically, when we bring this forward, the main changes that happen are the dates that midterm and semester grades and grades at the middle school are pulled for academic eligibility, so that is one change that, or update that is on there. The other change that I would draw your attention to is on page 2 and 3 regarding academic eligibility. Just updates our language to be more relevant with incomplete grades as kids retake tests, or if they need to finish a test, as long as they have a passing grade, they're still remaining to be eligible. And then the third part is our appeals process, just updating our language regarding that to give us more options when we do have to navigate an appeal. The previous language was very specific to only building principals to be a part of that appeal process, where we wanted to have a broader wide of options to allow other administrators to be a part of that process, to give us more options to limit conflicts of interest or previous relationships or knowledge of students.
Any questions with that?
Yeah, Trent, there's a difference in the number of days between fall athletics and activities in winter and spring.
Yeah.
Is that because of the 25% of the season, or is there another reason?
Yeah, so the reason that it's different is we have that option in the fall to do it based on calendar days versus school days. If we use the number of school days in the fall, school doesn't start until usually September 1st, and fall sports start in August. So like girls golf, they start competing that second week of August already, and the first football game is the third week of August. So a kid that was academically ineligible they'd miss all of August, and then their clock wouldn't start until we started school. So that would actually put them out for most of the fall season then. So the WIA gives us that flexibility to use calendar days to start the fall season, so that's why that one's different.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a big difference.
And then I was wondering why summer school isn't allowed to figure into it.
Yep, so that was a change that we made 3 or 4 years ago possibly already, and the reason being that students who are in the winter and spring sports do not have that option to do summer school to recover credit to maintain eligibility.
And there were a couple more. You have the incomplete, if it's a failing grade for high school, but it wasn't in there for middle school.
Yeah, I think the difference on that is just standards-based is used at the middle school where they're able to show kind of in progress versus at the high school we aren't using standards-based, it's based on percentages.
Okay. And under community service, it says that it has to be pre-approved by the principal and the athletic activities director. Do you want both of them, or could it be or and or?
We've had it that way because we work in tandem on a lot of things.
So you want to keep it that way? In the language changes under the appeals process, for number 2, you've got some words about who has not been involved in the investigative process. Do you want to add those words to number 3 also? You changed it from listing elementary and middle school principals to one administrator from within the district. Do you also want who has not, that same language that's used in number 2, who has not been involved in the
Yeah.
investigative process,
You know,
or is it not necessary?
I'll take a look at it a little bit more. It typically wouldn't be necessary, but it's worth looking at further before it comes back for the next meeting.
And I know I asked you about this last year. Is it a WIAA rule that a student cannot participate in more than one sport at the same time in the same season?
Great question. That's a local control decision.
Okay. Because in the past, we have had,
At some points in our district's history, we have. I know, at least in my time as athletic director and coaching before moving into this role, we haven't had one in quite some time. In talking with coaches, it becomes really difficult for an athlete to be truly committed to one team versus another, or they run into having competition on the same nights, and which team are you going with? It's really difficult for them to be a part of 2 teams during the same season.
so it's our local preference.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Trent? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, moving on to our superintendent updates.
Awesome, we're excited. I've got my friends here today, and we are so pumped that you're here. Yeah, so Terry and Paula are gonna come up. They've got a presentation up here, and we're gonna kind of do a little bit of partnering, but they're going to kind of give you a big overview of the work that's been happening over the last couple months in terms of starting to develop a draft for our new strategic plan. I obviously had emailed the board and I attached it to the agenda as well. I want to stress that what we have going right now is truly a draft. Have been working on getting feedback from our key stakeholder group, from students, from staff. Obviously as a board, we're interested in your feedback as well. But I don't want to take too much of their thunder, so I'm going to turn it over to Terry and Paula. And they're going to deliver all the excitement here. And then we'll have time for questions and things like that when they're done.
Yes, I'm just talking about kind of computer and doesn't have much reports. Here's the
Good evening, board members and Dr. Donnelly. We are very excited to be here tonight. We've spent a lot of time with your district stakeholders and the administrative team, and it's really been an in-depth process to gather as much input and now feedback, as Dr. Donnelly said, as possible. I'm Terry Stallo, my colleague.
Hi, I'm Paula.
We are educators, former administrator, former board member, and we have the opportunity to work with multiple school districts around a wide array of services, particularly around strategic planning. We know that one of the most important documents, if it truly is a living document, is the strategic plan. It aligns priorities, and it makes sure that everybody is on the same page. And part of what we really believe about the strategic plan and the process in creating it is to make sure there is a lot of stakeholder input so that this truly is a community-created, ultimately board-approved document which drives the direction of the district. So tonight what we'd like to do is give you an overview of the process. We want to review the input and some of the themes that we got from stakeholders. There's a lot of data here. Because we wanted to be really transparent with those themes, we'll go through it really, really quickly, but we wanted to be sure that you had all of that. And we also want you to understand where the key stakeholder committee left off with the themes that emerged from them, and where the administrative team then took all of that input into a writing process. And that's kind of what gets us to where we are tonight. Ultimately, then you'll take a look at the draft recommendations to date, and we're happy to answer any questions. So the question that really focused everything was, how do we ensure the Somerset School District prepares students for an ever-changing world? And the process that we use is to spend some time focusing on the past, to make sure the key stakeholder committee truly understands the present, and then to forecast and look and examine what is it that our students need from us to be successful in their futures. So I know this is really small print, but we wanted you to see the scope and the involvement in the entire process, which started before February, and in February, that first meeting with the administrative team, multiple focus groups, also then the community survey. We had the key stakeholder group, came back to the administrative team, back to the key stakeholder group, some of it in person, some of it not in person, and ultimately are with you this evening to share the information with you.
All right, yes. So as Terry mentioned, we are going to just provide a high-level overview of these themes. You know, one of the things that, just to build on what Terry said, that as a former school board member, former superintendent, we know the power of including our community, our students. Some of you might be familiar with that phrase out of the disability movement of nothing about us without us. And so you are going to see a voluminous amount of data, but again, as Terry said, wanting to be really transparent so that when you are out in the community, we really can speak to the integrity of the process as we hope to demonstrate here tonight. So, admin teams. By and large, we heard a lot about your students, the amazing students, and the work that they are doing and the families. So opportunities, really wanting to provide those personalized learning opportunities within the community to really enrich and support them for the world ahead when they graduate your schools. Staff focus themes, so we had 3 prompts that we focused on. They were I like, I wish, and I wonder. And for those of you watching or the board who received the same survey, those were those same prompts, and so you'll see the consistencies throughout. So again, really that focus that they have with your students. Terry and I often marveled at, you have an incredibly dedicated and committed staff professionals who really, truly want to see each student succeed. I wish, again, going back to being really student-focused, wishing that we had the resources, the time, all the things that we need at our disposal to make sure that we can take care of every student. Wondering how they can really grow the efficacy of their own instruction with their colleagues, with the resources that are available, and again, how to better support the students' social, emotional, and academic growth and well-being. You'll see here just a breakdown of the students who did respond to the survey. We had 134 responses, so we'll go through those. All right, students overwhelmingly talked about the flex schedule that they really, really liked. They talked about the campus and the benefits that they were afforded of having the proximity all in one campus together. Talked about the teachers and the variety of offerings that they were given. I wish. So it may seem contradictory, but some also talked about wishing that there were more options, that knowing that there are multiple pathways for our students to succeed, and some perhaps yearning for some more enrichment opportunities to meet their needs. They talked also about a culture that really did respect and value and welcome all. They wondered, they were very in tune to the budget cuts. We saw that in focus groups as well with your high school students, but really wondering as well, kind of what is next, what is the future going to hold for the district? And then we put down there, many said nothing, so we thought that was important to note too, that there were a lot of blank responses, which I think is typical probably for many teens. All right, so here are the responses from the parents and the families and the community business partners and staff, mostly parents. Again, the professionals, the educators, the adults who are in the building serving and supporting their students. Talked about the facilities, also talked about additional offerings and programmatic opportunities for them, and how might they be able to really hone in on those individual and particular needs of each student. Again, going back to how do we meet the needs of every student. Talk about, or comments about what is the future going to look like with the growth and the changing population in Somerset. How will the district responsively adapt and prepare for that? And will our community support our district? All right, moving to the students, Terry and I had the great fortune of working with about 20 high school students for a couple hours and hearing what they had to say around those prompts. Again, the flex schedule. Really learned a lot about kind of what that really provided them. Talked about just really being able to kind of meet their needs as different learners and how they really appreciated that freedom and that agency. The environment, again, a lot of adults who really cared and were invested in their learning, but more importantly, who they were as people and really taking care of all of them, so to speak, seeing more than just a grade or that academic piece. And then also the school culture. They talked a lot about really enjoying kind of the closeness of the campus and the culture that provided. Again, students talking about the facilities. Also talking about more unity, and they did talk about that they sensed that there was some division, and they really had wanted and hoped in the school that they could really come together and that students could show that really inclusive culture and a place where every student belongs. Also talked about the courses and some of the different offerings that perhaps that they'd be interested in, and also conversation around the dress code. All right, so they were very honest with us, which we appreciated, and they said, you know, I wonder if our voice is really going to have a difference. What impact will it have? They asked around, again, very in tune and touch with the nuances of school funding. Each one of them spoke about the personal impact that they saw in their own classrooms, or perhaps to them personally in terms of supports. Really wanting to be dialed in and wanting more communication and really wanting to know what was going on in their schools. All right, so as Terry mentioned, we had 2 key community stakeholder committee meetings. We met for 3 hours. And we had 41 members, and so this is just a high-level overview of the agenda and the topics that we went through. Again, it was really important for us to make sure that people were having a voice, that all perspectives had a chance to be heard, and that there really was a healthy exchange of ideas and discussion. As Terry mentioned, we had that focus on the past. We did a story wall. What is the history of the last 20 years in the Somerset School District? How does that impact how we look to the future? Focusing on the present, reviewing much more in depth all the data that you just saw in some of those slides. We did a SOAR analysis, which stands for the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations, and the results. And then focusing on the future, and you'll see that mind map as we move forward here. Dr. Donnelly presented a state of the district, highlighting and speaking to all of these topics, again, giving more context, more narrative, more information for the community group to really have all the facts and get a feel as best as they could as they were going to be charged with identifying some of those key strategies and priorities for the district. All right, so we'll focus on the present. You'll see going through the themes, and again, having time for discussion and questions and people really to do a deeper dive into what the data had revealed. All right, the SOAR analysis. So you'll see some prompts there for each of the quadrants. Those were questions that helped get the group thinking about, again, kind of what is it that we do really well? What are the things that we want to improve on? What are the things, what are those visions of possibilities for our students, for our staff, for our community? And what are the results? How will we know that we are on track? And how will we know that we are making progress toward our identified goals? Strengths, again, the adults, the teachers, the staff, the educators, and professionals in your buildings, the schedules, service learning, the multiple pathways, just to name a few. Opportunities, talking about, again, that communication, that is always something, right, that we all can do better at. How do we strengthen those channels? Talking about community ed, that was a big one as well. And then how do we bring the community together to coalesce around the well-being of our students. Aspirations, really wanting to make sure that we are taking care of the whole child and their well-being, preparing them for the future, which they will embark upon, whatever pathway or route they go once they graduate, and really making sure that they are equipped with the skills that are going to help them be a functioning and contributing member in our society. Results, talked about a student portfolio, the 4 C's, bringing back that joy of learning and excitement of being in the classroom, and how can we kind of reignite that with our community and our students. This was the focus on the future snapshot that you see, the things that we had worked on in terms of things that the key committee really needed to, that we invited them to consider as they thought about those key those key priorities. So that economic forecast, telling them, what does the county, what does the city of Somerset, what does this region look like in terms of jobs, in terms of some economic factors that may influence the students' choices and opportunities beyond the walls here.
So again, this was all done over a course of several nights, and we went through multiple processes to really try to get individuals to think about what they thought individually, but then really to talk in small groups and ultimately come up with some themes. So again, coming back to that question, why do we, or how do we ensure the Somerset School District prepares students for an ever-changing world? And we just wanted to keep grounding people in that question. So the activity there, where we ended with the key stakeholder committee, after they went through and designated the SOAR, we asked them to do a mind map. And that was based on all of the data that they had heard, all of the activities that we had done, to really come up with what did they believe, individually first, is that key initiative or strategy that needs to happen in order for the future of our students to be what we want it to be. So this was the mind map that we came up with. And it really was people sharing ideas, and then we saw the interconnectedness of it all. You know, ultimately we're gonna have, you're going to approve a strategic plan that's really linear, and it has key components to it. But this is what the day in schools and education looks like. It's a whole lot of stuff happening at once. Even if we have math here and science here, we know that that integration of curriculum is so important, just like the integration with this. So as individuals were able to put up their ideas, then we also asked them to vote. Each individual on that key stakeholder committee got a little dot, and we said, you can put all 4 of them, of your dots, in the same area if you believe that is the highest priority, or you can divide them up. So you can kind of see dots were kind of aligning to some certain things, and definitely some themes emerged from that key stakeholder group. So that got to the end of that second meeting with the key stakeholder group. We also asked them to talk about the key messages, because they were folks that were in the room. And we said, what would you want the people who aren't in the room, even though all stakeholders had a chance to provide input, what would you want people to know? And these were some of those key messages, really valuing all of the multiple perspectives that were in the room, making sure that they were open-minded in regards to the kids' needs, staying positive and future-focused, making sure that people understood that the priorities really were a collective group of people looking at a vast amount of data, and ultimately the importance of that shared vision for our students. So from there, we came back a couple weeks later, not long after that, and spent time with the administrative team. We really quickly reviewed the data with them. Many of them were in that key stakeholder committee, so they were part of the process and heard the perspectives in the process. But then we came back to them and we said, all right, you need to take a look at your current work, because we don't want to just erase all the work you've been doing for the last 5 years. So take a look at that, what needs to continue, identify, take a look at that mind map, and really determine what did your community, what did the key stakeholders say are priorities, and then we asked writing teams to begin the process of drafting those new statements. Dr. Donnelly uses this. This was the old work from the current strategic plan, and just color coding to see, okay, what of that work that they set out to do 5 years ago is completed, what's in process but needs a little bit more work to be operationalized, and what's the work that needs additional work. So it was really important that the leaders looked at this. The key stakeholder committee also looked at this, because again, the last thing we want to do is stop something midstream and not have it fully implemented. And then the team, and what is in front of you is very different than how we left that day, and we'll let Dr. Donnelly share some things, but the day that we were with the team, they did a fantastic job of pretty quickly taking a look at the stakeholder input, and then we asked them individually to also prioritize, and we really came up with 4 of those themes pretty quickly. And then they went to the hard work of starting to draft some of the goals. Dr. Donnelly, the team did some remarkable work from the time that we left until then. You got it back out to staff, back out to that key stakeholder group for additional feedback. So I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to share about that right now.
Just really quick, I think as we were going through our discussions of all of the data, and we had that yellow piece of paper that they showed on the slide, I think we have that memorized. Trying to make sure that we captured the voices and perspectives from the groups and the input. And I think the biggest kind of aha moment for us, if you look at kind of this version you have in front of you, was trying to compartmentalize a little bit, even though many of these things cross over, but looking at number one, what are we doing for students? What are we doing for staff? How do we talk about our operational excellence? And then how do we engage our community? I think that's probably the biggest change from the previous plan, because our previous plan, it was kind of all mixed together, which isn't good or bad, but we felt like this gave us much more intentional direction when we started kind of building those mini strategies, because it allowed us just to think about students, just to think about staff, et cetera. So we didn't start that way. I mean, when you left there, we were still trying to kind of put it all together, and we just were hitting a brick wall. So we said, okay, what does it look like if we separated it all out? So we spent another week just hammering it out, trying to figure that part out. So we're excited about where it landed in terms of just, the 4 pillars that we have here, and separating work that we know is, again, it all meshes together, but helping us be more intentional. So.
I think what's really impressive, I applaud the administrative team. I really applaud that group of key stakeholders. I mean, there was really honest and hard conversation in that room, but I think the environment had been created that there was really a safe space for people to be able to question and gain clarification from one another. I also have a lot of respect, Dr. Donnelly, for your process in taking this draft and saying, okay, we want to make sure that our staff see this, that the key stakeholders see this draft, and then are able to provide additional input. So I think that's the phase you're at right now, gathering that, have probably gathered a lot of it, and then really taking a look to say, okay, is there anything in this that folks are saying, oh, whoa, you missed something, or you need to change. And if that's the case, your team will come back together, and then when this comes back to the board in 2 weeks for action, you'll make any changes based on that input. So huge amounts of feedback, or input first of all, from across the multiple stakeholders, and now a whole nother round of feedback, so really impressive. We're happy to take any questions. We enjoyed our time with all of the stakeholders, especially the students. And really also very impressive that not only did we have time with the students in focus groups, but the students were a part of that key stakeholder committee as well, which really shows your commitment in elevating their voices.
Thank you to the 2 board members that spent time with us and for all of your input and feedback, being that liaison between your all board members.
Happy to take any questions.
I just think it's really cool seeing that yellow beam there. Seeing all the lines and I'm like, holy cow, but then coming to this is quite amazing. I love how it's organized. I really like the student, staff, operations, community, those pillars. I think to me, just how I look at things, and this is just laid out really well, and it's just amazing to see the work how it started compared to now. So.
Well, again, we have been delighted to work with the district, so thanks for the opportunity. We know the importance of your role in this. Once you do take action and hopefully approve whatever has come forward, because you trust the process and the voices that came forward, then your role to really support this and to make sure that you're helping staff and Dr. Donnelly focus on this, because we always see the strategic plan is as our commitment and our promise to the community. There's a whole lot of other things that come up on any given day, and it'll be your support that allows that focus of these strategies to do the work that needs to be done for kids.
And at any time, if any of you have any questions, or Dr. Donnelly, any of you, your team, we'd be happy to just kind of share some of the work we've done with other districts to come up with what does it look like for the board's role to really make sure that they're creating the conditions for these strategies to come to life for them to become operationalized, to have the resources that are behind them, and then how to have that accountability piece, which we know, of course, is a critical part of their role.
All right, thank you very much.
Any
you
other
very much.
questions that anybody has about specific pieces?
No,
or-
I responded to Shannon's email about feedback, and I also really like the 4 pillars and how we got from a huge document for this. Very well done.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Terry and Paula said, next steps, as you maybe debrief this a little bit more too, certainly send me any feedback that you have as individual board members. I have kind of a running document of emails and conversations that I've had with either staff members, community members, anyone that's kind of seen the draft, and we will go over that tomorrow as an admin team and start kind of looking and having some discussion if we're going to make any more edits on kind of what you see here. If I wasn't clear, the 2 documents you have in front of you is the exact same information, just kind of version 1 was what I threw together here, and version 2 is all Alicia's wisdom. I basically said like, okay, this is my vision, can you make it happen? And she did this about a half hour later. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I was thinking of. So that is all Alicia, so thank you. But if you have any other comments or anything, please let me know. I have had a couple staff ask, wanting to dig into where's the action steps, all the deliverables that come with it. So that will be kind of the next step after our next meeting, and hopefully the board approves kind of this version.
So we just approve this and
Correct.
without the actions?
Yes. Because the action steps is the day-to-day work of the admin team and the staff. You do 50,000 foot.
I trust you.
Does that make sense? But I think what Paula shared is an important piece of, the accountability, right? And where does that come into play, especially as we enter kind of the next school year and we're talking about my role in all of this. So I think that will be some really good discussion for us to have. I'll just throw out there, any resources that you have that you want to just proactively give us, I think would be great. For many of us, we're kind of going through this phase of the process for the first time as either board members and new superintendent. So I think any support to kind of guide us through that, in my opinion, would be great. Well, I'll talk about this kind of next phase, because I think, Bruce, to kind of get to your facial expression of like, well, hang on a second. I think there's some pieces here too that I want to talk about with the board when we get to that phase of just the communication. What does that look like every month? Again, kind of ties into accountability, but a little bit more of like, how do we keep you more informed with the action steps and things like that? So I think that will come, but right now I'm trying to keep people here of, let's just kind of see what we've got here. Do we feel good about this? I know Lacey and Lori, obviously having been a part of that process, I'm hoping you feel like, I know you just kind of spoke to this, but this, encompasses, the dialogue and things that were happening at those meetings, because we worked very hard to literally study that yellow sheet and making sure that we were pulling some of those very specific words and verbiage to make sure that we matched it in here. So we didn't always agree in terms of an admin team. We had a lot of discussions, but we feel really good about where we landed. So anything else?
I think it would be helpful, as you said, Paula, like how can us as a board, what is our role in this? And I think we've had a lot of board development and how we can, support different things in our role as a board. I think that would be helpful. So any information on that, or that we can kind of partner together, I think that would be helpful for us. As what our role then in the strategic plan and how to support and how to go forward.
Happy to do that. And Bruce, your questions, your question's really fair. Your role will be asking for how you monitor. Because while you won't be doing the day-to-day work, you'll want to know, how's that going? So I'm sure there'll be some regular reports or something, and again, we can support you in whatever you need with that.
Awesome. All right. Moving on? We're good? All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just had 2 other things. So I attached a memo from Jody written to myself and the board. She and I have had some discussions the last couple months of wanting to add some flexibility into our employee handbook when or if we run into a scenario, and this has happened, where we potentially have a support staff or a supervisory support staff taking on some additional duties that likely would be essentially above kind of their step and their pay grade. This may happen for a wide variety of reasons. I don't want to get into too many specifics in terms of, I don't want to talk about specific scenarios, but asking for essentially the flexibility that if this should occur, allowing me the flexibility to be able to fairly compensate that employee who then would be potentially doing tasks or duties basically on the next pay grade. Nothing that I would envision happening every week. It could go a whole school year and never happen, but it's happened this year twice for two different reasons. So we'd simply like to be able to honor fairly the work that staff may end up having to do, due to potentially situations out of their control. Hopefully you had an opportunity to read the memo. Certainly if you have questions, let me know. Tonight is just designed to be a first reading. I'm not looking for any action. I can answer any questions that you have, but essentially it's just designed to ensure that if we have a scenario come up and somebody is having to either cover or fill in or take on some additional things that wouldn't necessarily be aligned with their current step, that I would have the ability to be able to compensate them fairly on a short-term basis. So it wouldn't be reclassifying anybody. It would basically just be paying them fairly and equitably for added work that they're doing above and beyond what their job description would be.
Would you be getting a sub then for their old position?
No, and for example, this happened this year and it was for a week. I mean, so, but for that week, we had a staff member that was asked to do things that would not necessarily be in their job description. It would be basically a step above, if that makes sense. So I'm a little vague on purpose because I just don't want to unintentionally speak about any specific scenario, but.
I have some questions because
Sure.
in what's written here, you're talking about cover the position of an employee in a higher pay grade.
Mhm.
So I thought that meant if, for example, you had someone on, and I don't have the wage schedule in front of me, but I'm gonna make up some numbers.
Okay.
I thought that meant you were talking about an employee who was on pay grade 102 taking on responsibilities of an employee who was on pay grade 103 or higher.
Mhm.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, so like in the simplest form, let's say you have a support staff that potentially is filling in and taking on some duties for a supervisory support staff. I mean, that's the simplest, I guess, way I can
Okay.
explain it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, again, really nothing more, nothing less, other than if I have that scenario happen, I would like the ability to be able to say, we realize that you currently now are doing some tasks, again, short term, that,
Or in a higher pay grade.
right, mhm,
Okay.
that,
And then what did you mean by corresponding steps? So, for example, if you had a support staff who was taking on responsibilities of supervisory support
Right.
staff, would that, and you said corresponding step, if the supervisory support staff is on step 6, do you mean you'd put them at step 6 in the higher pay grade?
no, it means wherever, potentially where that person is, that they are taking over those duties, that we would look at starting there. Does that make sense?
So you mean at the beginning wage
Right.
of that pay grade?
Right. Yeah.
Would it be possible for you and Jody to work on that language?
Yeah.
So it says that?
Now that you say that out
more
loud,
clearly?
yeah, that makes sense, yeah,
Okay,
yep,
thank you so much.
yep,
Those were the questions I had.
okay. Again, it could go years without this ever happening. It just so happened with some things this year that it's happened more than once, and so I'd like to be able to have that flexibility as we talk about retaining staff and doing those kinds of things. So, thank you. The only thing I just want to give a shout out to our student board representatives, Victoria Gomez and Addison McGeehan. Did a great job. Addison is a senior, Victoria is a junior, so I'm hoping that she comes back next year to rejoin the board. I have some ideas of some ways I'd like to expand those roles a little bit too, beyond just, their monthly report, which is awesome, but I think there's some other ways that I've seen other districts utilize their board reps, as we heard Terry and Paula talk about student voice and those kinds of things that could have a little bit more impact on some of our day-to-day business too. So that will come later, but just wanted to give those two a shout out for the work that they did this school year. So that is what I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our end of the year superintendent evaluation. Originally, we had said that we will do our superintendent evaluation 2 times a year. So we had originally said January and June. Our last superintendent evaluation got moved back a little bit. It was more like February when we kind of put everything together. So we're looking at putting this together and having that second superintendent evaluation by July or in July. Just wondering if there's feedback about that process. Last time we sent it out, you guys sent it to me as far as that evaluation went, and we put everything together as far as feedback, comments, and had that just, I guess, is going forward if July looked feasible, and if you'd like to go about that in a different process or ideas or things that might include.
I was fine, I had to put it together.
I was fine as far as putting things together. I think
Good with,
one of the things I definitely like to do is when we do go over everything together, and that when we go into closed session to go through that, I just want to ensure that we have every board member. I know a lot of times and I know summer gets busy, so I just want to make sure that when we do go forward with that as a board, that we put it off if not everybody is here, or just make sure, that we schedule that closed session for a time that we can ensure that all members are here and present. But otherwise, I'm looking at starting that process the beginning of July, giving kind of that same amount of time for feedback from each board member. I would then put everything together in one document, and then we'd have that time to go over in closed session, and then meet with Shannon as well to go over that review with her.
I thought the process went well last time. The only thing that I was thinking though is, can we start in June, so we make sure that
So
we're
make
done
sure by definitely.
July?
So maybe by next meeting even, because just having some of that flex time. And I think that's what kind of happened for January. It's like by the time everything was put together and we had that. So maybe by the next meeting I can have out a draft for you guys to fill out, and then it'll give everybody the time to be able to start that process.
Are you foreseeing that the form would be the same as the one we had last time?
Unless if you think that there should be any changes. I know we had kind of talked about that as a group the last time. There was one specific question that we had, and then we kind of came around like, no, that is necessary, it's needed. And I think between the 2 times, in my opinion, like keeping that consistent between both.
I think so too.
I agree.
To not change that up at this time, I mean, maybe that next round, but I don't think this round it's really appropriate to change what you're looking at.
I agree.
So looking at schedule,
There's just one other thing that I would like somebody to check. Is there anything in state statute that this has to be done by June 30th? Because
I will check on that.
Okay. I don't know if there is or not.
I can check too. I don't think so, because I've seen it kind of all over the board, but I'll look.
Thank you.
And if that's the case, I will notify you ASAP, and we will get going on that evaluation.
So I just have a question, just so I can prepare. So let's say that there's no state statute and we move forward with July. Are we thinking, and I know this is the next agenda item, but if the 2 meetings were the 10th and the 24th in July, are we thinking that the 10th would be the meeting that I would present my data and my evidence of my goals?
Yes, and then we would go through that, then in closed session then, the 24th.
Right, okay.
Would that work?
So So Shannon would present on the 10th, and then we would have time after that to fill out our form and give it back to you.
Does
Yep.
that sound feasible to you,
Yeah,
Shannon?
great. I
July
just,
10th?
as I'm trying to prioritize my work, I just wanted, how quickly I.
Or would you rather do the 24th?
No, either one is great. I just, the sooner I know, the better.
It would give you more time, Lacey, to compile everything. If, and I don't know if this is possible for Shannon, because that means you have less time. If you would present your portion at the next meeting in
Great.
June.
I have it all. It's just a matter of just, right, taking some time to do. I can do the 19th.
I don't know, it's up to you. You're the one compiling all the information, I mean, the two of you.
Looking at just schedules, so right now our regular session in July is scheduled for the 24th. Does anybody see any challenges with that on their schedule as far as attending that meeting? I would say actually both July meetings, because I want to make sure, because I think that was another problem we ran into the last time, is that when you presented, we had
One was gone.
One gone,
Yep.
and I know then I think they took time to meet with you, but I
Yep.
think both of those pieces are so important for all of us to be present for.
I'm good.
I
Just
know
let
we've
me know.
already
I think either date is
said
fine.
that the next June meeting, everybody will be in attendance for. So would you be comfortable presenting the next meeting?
Great.
Are you sure?
100%.
Okay.
I can make it happen.
And so that was June 19th.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then that, I think, I'm not looking at a calendar right now. So from June 19th to July 10th, does that give you more than 2 weeks then for turnaround?
I'm off of work then, so it becomes much more
Okay.
doable. No, that's completely fine. But I just want to make sure, Shannon, that's like next meeting, so I want to make sure that that's okay on your end.
As long as I know before I leave here tonight, I can get it together. Great. Yep. So is that what we are planning on?
Yes.
Okay.
And then also just kind of, this isn't really a superintendent evaluation, but looking at our board goals and how going forward, we made those board goals for ourselves and we made them, but then how do we kind of want to revisit them for ourselves? So if you are okay with it, all of you, kind of looking maybe at the same time, taking our board goals and just, thinking of doing this pretty informally, but kind of rating ourselves on how we think we're doing on the 3 areas with establishing a plan to support the new administration, supporting the strategic plan, and then ongoing board development, if we can maybe kind of put that in there at the same time in a separate way.
So by July 10th, you mean then?
Yeah, and it would be very, again, informal, but just we took the time to do our goals, and making goals, important is looking at how we're doing ourselves and meeting them and working as a board, so. Sorry, I kind of added that on to piece. Okay, moving on for our policy update. We have the first reading of 5410 for
Wanna go to future
promotion.
board meeting dates?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that. Future board meeting dates, that is linked. And I know Shannon and I kind of spoke about if there's any, we had talked about at the last meeting, if there's concerts, different things that kind of come up in the meantime, but that schedule really isn't out for next school year.
Yeah, I
right?
think our best bet is probably, I can do a better job of looking a little bit further ahead, so we're not sitting here like, oh, there's a band concert tonight, right? So just being more diligent months ahead of time. So I think if these dates look okay, I would go with these, because I don't have all those other dates yet, and then we can adjust as needed.
Okay.
Or
Well, and if
move
we can
move up the
get
meeting
these
time or-
dates out to building principals and staff,
Yep.
then they kind of,
Yep.
can have a heads up, hey, try
Yep.
to avoid these dates so we can attend or be involved with those things. So are there any dates on that list going from July, so that should be,
Sounds good.
That's in the past.
yeah, those numbers just need to be, instead of 2022, need to be changed to 2023.
Oh.
That first column,
Yeah.
we skipped a year.
But you have the right date.
Yeah, it's just the year date.
So close.
That, easy fix. But any other dates that conflict with, national holiday? I know that.
That'll work.
We're all good? Okay.
The only thing I noticed, and I'm impressed that you were able to make it happen only once, is only once in the whole year are we going week-to-week meetings. February 26th to March 4th, there's only 1 week. in
February's a
between.
short month.
But I don't know that you can ever avoid that totally.
Okay. Then moving on to the policy update of 5410, promotion, placement, and retention. Let's see. This was sent out. Ian, with you being on the policy committee, is there anything you want to add or say in regards to that?
The last category is like.
I really liked how the administrators reworded A and B by giving the specific state assessment of basic or better in at least 3, and adequate progress, 1.0 or higher. That was something that was missing in the past, and I think this is much better and more clear.
We have to change the student score on a 4th grade state to an 8th grade in that last one. On page 30.
Yeah, there's a typo.
Which one?
Student score on the 8th grade state assessment.
And the first line is, it says 4th grade assessment.
Oh, yeah. Now I see it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, things that need to be changed or added? Nope. Okay. So we'll move on to our topics for action, looking at the personnel update and the athletics personnel update. If there's any questions or if somebody wants to make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve 11A and B.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to know about Tim Duggan. Is he related to our former staff member?
I don't know. I don't know.
That was it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's go once we're on the table. Bruce, do you want to start us out?
I do want to say just thanks to everybody who worked on that strategic plan. I mean, it was a lot of work, so you and all the staff and the administrators and putting it together. You know, I know it was a ton of work a while ago and did it the first time, so I'm glad we did it again. So thank you everybody who worked on that and put all this stuff together. And then congrats to the softball team. I'm sure everybody saw that they're off to state this week on Friday for the first time ever in girls softball. And then the track athletes who competed down at the state tournament last weekend, we had a bunch of people place. So that was pretty awesome as well. And then congrats everybody on the end of the school year. It's great.
March?
Nothing.
Lori?
And the very well done graduation ceremony. It was good. And thank you to Leslie Thomas for her continued work in being awarded grants for Spartan Kids Club. I believe this is the 9th one that she has been awarded, and it helps both the district and gives bonuses and incentives to those employees. So thank you so much to her.
Ian? Yeah, congrats to our graduating class of 2023, and as Lori said, it was a great graduation ceremony. It was really cool to be a part of too. And in addition to the softball and track, we also had one state golfer make it to state, so August Lane, I think. Congrats, lots of cool athletic things going on. Thank you to staff for a great school year. I felt like it was like normal. We you were back, and it was great. So, and Shannon, congrats to you for your doctorate, and I thought of that as Terry referenced you as Dr. Natalie. So thank you for a great first school year as superintendent as well. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned at 7:20.